in. It's not working for me. Okay, now it says it's live. That's I think he clicked it for us,
Okay.
which is great.
I
Okay,
did. I
okay,
did.
perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Hello and welcome to Building Your Capacity with Reverend Dr. MLK Raven. I am again excited to see you guys. I'm so glad that you joined us tonight. And tonight we have a special guest, Mr. Thomas Shannon, currently living in Kentucky. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. We were talking just a minute ago. I'm currently in Columbia, South Carolina, and we were talking about how hot it is right now, the weather. Thomas, what were your comments about Kentucky weather right now?
It's it's much cooler than what you're dealing with.
Yeah, he was trying to rub it in. Well, I'd love for you to get to know Thomas Shannon. He has a wealth of knowledge. He's the ultimate photographer. And one of the things that I truly love about him is his love of his family and how he supports his wife and his children, how he has been just a stand-up guy. So again, welcome, Thomas. Could you tell us a little bit about your growing up, where you grew up, and a little bit about your childhood?
Sure. Thank you, Michelle, for having me. I hope that anything that I can offer your audience will be a benefit. That's my goal. I was born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana,
Okay.
1958. And to give you perspective, in 1958, the average cost of a house was $14,000.
Okay.
Gallon of gasoline was 25 cents.
Ah, okay.
And when you begin to describe yourself to others, you usually look at your family background and the things that have happened to you in your life.
Mhm.
Because those are the things that form you and shape you.
Right.
So one of the things I remember as a young child, 5 years old, was the death of John F. Kennedy, the president that was assassinated. So as a young child looking at the TV in black and white, I knew it was solemn. I knew it was people were grieving. And
Hmm.
at 5 years old, the adults don't talk to you they don't talk to you clearly.
Okay.
So you just glean things from the world. So the world didn't exist really for me because I was a child, and a blade of grass was exciting in the wind. It was blowing in the wind, or anything could be exciting for a child. So
Hmm.
watching the adults in my family in such a somber state of mind was really interesting. It was for a child. So that's one of my earliest memories of watching that uh, funeral
Hmm.
transpire on TV. And the
So,
second thing that I remember that shaped my world was the death of MLK, or Martin Luther King,
hmm.
and I was 10 years old. And when you're 10, you really aren't aware of how the world exists. You're a child. You're just doing things that 10-year-olds do. And I
Right.
remember my aunt coming down the stairs and saying, "They just shot Martin Luther King." And so as a child, I was like, "Who is Martin Luther King?" Didn't know who he was. But in the week that followed, uh, during his funeral, I became aware of who this man was. And so that's for me, I think, marked the awareness of the world for me, was Martin Luther King's funeral. Because up
Wow.
until then, I was a child, and I
Hmm.
did what children do.
Wow.
So those are in terms of how the world, and of course there are other things as well as my family life and such things as that. But those are the two external things that made me aware that I live in a world,
Right.
because your family tends to um, protect you from the world, which is what a family should do. And so that's yeah, that was kind of the world that my family protected me.
Uh-huh.
We lived in a black neighborhood. I went to a black church. I went to a black school. So I
Hmm.
wasn't really aware of white people per se. I
Huh.
saw them on TV. They
Sure.
were spoken about, but it was just not they just weren't part of reality. You would think so,
Hmm.
given the history of our country, but it was just when you live in a black neighborhood,
Uh-huh.
and I lived in the north because I have friends who were the same age as I am,
Uh-huh.
and they had a totally different experience
Sure.
from me. Um, uh, being born in 1958, and another person being born in 1958 in Montgomery, Alabama, is
Sure.
different from a black person who was born in 1958 in Indianapolis, Indiana. Particularly when I had a relatively stable family.
Uh-huh.
So there was never a lack of food on the table. There
Hmm.
was never a concern about shelter over our heads, because those things, the family that I was born and raised in, and the people that I saw,
Uh-huh.
that stuff was a done deal.
Taken care of.
Right? Because as a child, if you're provided for, there's not a concern for physical, for the material.
Sure.
And sometimes it can be very meager.
Hmm.
And yet a child is, I'm good. I'm not hungry. When
Hmm.
it's cold outside, it's cool inside. When it's hot outside, it's cool inside. Those sorts of things. I get candy. I get
Hmm.
to play with my toys. So that's a child's world.
Yeah.
So I had the child's world of not knowing that the world was a could be what it was, because my relatives and they experienced it. As I got older, I looked at their background.
Uh-huh.
It was like, wow, they had some challenges. But
Hmm.
yet, for us, you didn't hear about the challenges that they had in the household. It was mainly providing. They were the kind of people that didn't fuss and groan and moan, and they just did it. And as a child, that's the kind of thing that I got in life, was just
Hmm.
your business.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
So,
that's a world I live in.
so the way you're describing it, you saw the world. The world was your community, which was a black community. You did get some glimpses of the world with Dr. King's death and those sorts of things. But the way you grew up, it was somewhat separate. So it was the black community, and then there was another community, but you really didn't interact. Is that what you're saying?
Mhm.
Okay,
And I only knew of this community uh, through watching TV
got it. Okay. Hmm.
or watching the news, or some place that would be the most consistent place that I knew that I could go, and maybe at school, because I did have white teachers.
Hmm.
So, for example, we would watch black and white TV when I was young, and so we related to, even though the people didn't look like us, or
Hmm.
at least for me, I related to the story. That there was some conflict in the drama. So I related to the conflict that they were having in the drama, as opposed to that person looked like.
Right.
It was like a universal connection, as opposed to I need someone to look like me for me to feel connected to that event. But
Okay.
yeah, that's how we kind of, or at least that's how the world was for me. Uh,
Awesome. And so from elementary years, I know you mentioned Dr. King's death and that sort of thing. What about high school years? What stands out to you? Were you still in a black school at that time in high school?
yes, I interestingly enough, I went to a white high school. I was bused to a white high school.
Okay.
Now, let me back up a little bit. Before high school, I had a mother who put us in different kind of social settings.
Okay.
So we played lots of sports. We went to We would go to the library. We would go to events. We would go to plays and uh, uh, musical events, operas, and that sort of thing.
Okay.
The symphony orchestra, and things like that. She really made an effort to expose us to like a different world that was other than.
Okay.
So I went to a white high school, so I had a comfort in going to the white high school, even though we were in a pretty significant minority.
Okay.
So if the high school was 1,200 kids, there might have been 200 black kids.
Got it.
So, but nevertheless, I never felt uncomfortable because it was like it was an environment that my mother had prepared us for. So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't unusual to navigate in spaces and in places where people didn't look like me.
Okay.
So it was just part of, and some of it is part of my personality because I've been many places in my lifetime, and I have a comfort of being in a physical space.
Mm-hmm.
No one looks like me. Right?
Sure.
I live in a village, and we're the only black folks in that village, and I'm comfortable with it. It's just part of it. That's my personality, and part of it is that my mother made a concerted effort to expose her sons to
Mm-hmm.
environments so that when they would encounter these environments in life, they would have a comfort with it.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
that was a really, I could see I could see how that was beneficial for me in my life because of what my mother did, and I did the same thing for my children, which was to expose them to environments that they might not ordinarily. I really pushed them to
Mhm.
to to have that comfort in their lives. Like the world is yours. Wherever you put your feet, it belongs to you.
That's
And
one.
so having that was a pretty important thing I took away from my family because my mother was a nurse,
Okay.
and so she had a comfort with caring for anybody. If
Sure.
you needed if you needed comfort, that's my job. It doesn't matter who you look like and what your past was. So she sort of passed that on with other things as well. So
Yeah. I think that's so critical. Uh, being comfortable wherever you are, comfortable in your own skin, as some people say, but being able to be comfortable no matter where you are, because you're not judging yourself by your surroundings.
Mhm.
Right? Yeah. That's awesome. And so, high school. After high school, tell us a little bit about that transition. What did you do?
After high school, I attended university. I attended Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana.
Okay.
Um, and it was a similar situation. So at that time, the population of the student body was around 32,000 students full time.
Okay.
Um, combination of graduate and undergraduate students.
Mhm.
Out of that 32,000, if it was 500,000, I'm sorry, well, if it were 500 black kids at that school, undergraduate and graduate, I'd be surprised.
Okay. Yeah.
So the likelihood of you being the only black person on your dormitory floor
Uh-huh.
is pretty great. The likelihood that you might be one or two in a classroom is pretty likely.
Okay.
So with that being said, I was prepared for that environment.
Mm-hmm.
And because my mother was, unbeknownst to me, she was preparing us for that world,
Okay.
and which is what a parent does. A parent prepares their child for a world that they don't even know about the child.
Right.
So, and it prepared me for that environment, being in environments where it is not likely you're going to find someone. But I have a personality that I'm comfortable talking with anybody,
Sure.
anywhere, anywhere in the world. So, so that was the world for me as a young student. Now, mind you, that was 1972.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 1976. So you're just talking a scant 7 years after Martin Luther King was murdered. But
Mhm.
at that time, historically in America, there was a great consciousness of black self awareness. It was the manifestation of the civil rights movement. It had manifest, and that's the world that I lived in at that time. So a lot of times it was the first black superintendent this, the first black did that, and that sort of thing. That was the world in which I lived in, and it was a great uh, consciousness of black power in that at that time. Unlike anything, some could argue in that period, historical period after the Civil War, that was a pretty uh, significant period in American history. But the Civil Rights Movement, particularly after 1968 or after MLK's death,
Right.
there was a manifestation on the ground with people taking up that mantle to live their life in a way of consciousness that they never in the black community had never existed before. And
Wow.
it's this idea of going to college, or it was the idea of being the best person you could be. That was in the air at that time in a very significant way.
Wow.
So that was the world that I lived in, and it was just a consciousness of like doing better for yourself, doing better for your community. It was just a great deal of black consciousness when I went to school.
Mhm.
So that was the world that and I was encouraged. It was like I wanted to personally. I didn't want to be I wanted to do more with my life than what uh, some people had done before. Because there were people in the family that
Mhm.
had made it easier for me, unbeknownst to me.
Mhm.
And not until I was much older, in my 30s and 40s, did I come to realize, like, wow, these people, there were people before me. I didn't do this all on my own.
Mm.
So that was the life for me as a college student. And some of the things that I could complain about
Sure.
with my 65-year-old mind was that I was encountering things as an 18 and 19-year-old young black person.
Mhm.
And so the tools that I have now that it would just roll off my back. But as an 18 and 19-year-old, I might find offensive.
Right.
But as I've gained wisdom and life experience in my life, is whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. But eh, yeah, but that was part of growing up. Because some of the stuff that I like with some um, for example, with my wife, she has conversations with a lot of people,
Mhm.
and she was telling a story about how someone was doing her bad
Mhm.
to young people,
Mhm.
and so we're now in leadership roles
Mhm.
in our lives. But she never told the end of the story, which was in the end, this person had to honor her
Mm.
because she had achieved the rank that she had, and so the person had to salute her.
Mm.
Whereas 10 years prior, that person was a higher ranking officer. So
Mm.
that would be the end of the story. That would be the success. You
Right.
know, tell us, and when you're in a leadership role, your job is to inspire the young people to not fall down as much as I did. I fell down 7 times. I
Uh-huh.
want you to fall down 2 times, and maybe your children will fall down once.
Good.
Maybe her child won't fall down because we would have passed on that knowledge and that stuff that you need instead of you making the will yourself. It's
Mhm.
made, and you just follow the template. It's like follow the Bible. It's a template.
Right.
You'll probably do better if you follow this book. It'll give you some insight that you may not have had anyway.
Mm.
But that was the world I lived in. It was in the early '70s. Black people were going to college in numbers they had never gone before. They
Right.
they had jobs that they never had before in the history of America. There
Mm.
were there were there were black mayors for the first time in different cities around the country. There were
Right.
Congress people uh, uh, being voted into Congress that had never been voted for. So there was a dynamic energy going on in America in the black community that might not. And I just lived that. It's just I lived the experience and what was going on at that particular time, and I
Mhm.
wrote it. And so my life reflects it. And now I'm living the things that my wife and I put in place, and we have comfort in our lives because we put some things in place to give us comfort in our lives. So that's what college was, and it was a learning, and it's typical as any person who goes to college at 18, 19 years old, and they leave at anywhere from 21, 22, 23 years old,
Mhm.
and they go out and they do the world. But at that time, you're like learning who you are,
Mhm.
because up until that time in your life, it's generally about you. Like,
Uh-huh.
I finished high school, I finished college, or I did this and I did that. But
Sure.
once you start living life in terms of I'm married now, so there's other people that I'm concerned about. It's my wife that I'm concerned about. It's my children that I'm concerned about.
Mhm.
I'm I'm concerned about their safety. So I'm there. Who are they playing with? I'm concerned about the values that they have in their lives. So those are the things. But up until that time, it's pretty much self-focused because you're young. That's what young people do. They think the world is all about them
Right.
until you raise a family and then your life becomes something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
That's good.
yeah. But
That's
it was a great experience. I met my wife um,
Yeah,
in
tell us about that.
the college environment, which was good because when you um, when you when you choose someone as a life mate, it's good to be have similar values and
Uh-huh.
similar outlooks. So we grew up the same. We had similar values and values on life and what's important and what we believe will be important for children to have and how to nurture children and that sort of thing. And what kind of household
Mhm.
should be loving but firm. All those kinds of values that you think that are important because the goal is when you're 32 years old, you're not living in my house.
Mhm.
That's the goal. Like you got your own house.
Yeah.
So that's where I met my wife, and from there is that has a lot to do with the rest of my story. But
So,
yeah,
so, so for many people who are here listening, they don't know who your wife is. So
Mhm.
tell us about how you met um, Pamela Stevenson, and tell us a little bit. I'd love to hear this story.
um, during my college years, during the summer, I stayed at the university because there were always good summer jobs at university. So I rarely went home. Every once in a while, but rarely went home. So I
Hmm.
met my wife, and as I was in my 20s, I was probably at least 21, I would imagine.
Hmm.
Um, I met my wife. It was during the summer, so it was in between it was the summer session. So she was on campus, and that's where we met. And I guess the rest is history. We've been married 40. We'll be married 41 years.
Hmm.
Um, my wife was obligated to um, fulfill a obligation. She had a full ride military scholarship from the Air Force
Okay.
as a undergrad.
Hmm.
And so when we met, she had finished her undergrad, and when we became serious, she said, "I need to inform you that I'm obligated to fulfill the scholarship requirements from the military." And I was cool. You're the one. And it didn't take long for me to realize that my wife was the one. I had family is so critically important. I had women in my life
Hmm.
that made it clear what a good woman was.
Okay.
So I had an example in life. Oh,
Sure.
that's what a good woman looks like. So I had my mother. I
Uh-huh.
had my grandmother. Oh, that's what a good woman looks like. Or
Hmm.
that's what a good woman does. Or that's how a good woman lives her life. Or a good woman nurtures her children in such a way that it's just comforting, even to look at. It's like a blessing to even witness it.
Yeah.
And so I was clear when I met my wife. It was not difficult at all. You're the one because I had clear examples what a good woman is and can be in your life.
Well,
Oh my
Thomas, I have to interrupt you right there because there's so many young men who are looking for that good woman. What characteristics would you say that you were looking for based on the examples that you saw? And just a few things that you could share with some of the men who are searching.
I for me, it seemed to me that a good wife would be nurturing.
Hmm.
Because whenever I went over my grandmother's house, she has such a nurturing way about herself. And as a child, it was like being enveloped in this warmth of love. That was just an amazing thing. Like somebody could give that. Like I want to be around somebody like that, right? I and so and ironically enough, my grandmother had 6 children, so she has a whole bunch of grandchildren.
Hmm.
I'm part of the older grandchildren. So when I talk to my other cousins, they said the exact same thing. How such a wonderful woman this was, and how nurturing. I was like, I wanna live every day in my house with
Hmm.
somebody who's nurturing and kind and giving and pleasant, right? I
Right.
don't want anybody who's ready to go fist the cups on, on anything. You
Right.
look at me funny,
Hmm.
or I'm having a bad. But seriously, so that my mother was a very loving woman as well,
Uh-huh.
and she was an intelligent woman, and my mother was an avid reader, so she used her vocabulary well,
Okay.
and so for me, that taught me if I'm communicating with a woman, then I don't have to use one syllable words, or I can talk to a woman intelligently because my mother talked to us intelligently. So I
Right.
said, "Oh, that's how you're supposed to engage with women
Yeah.
intelligently," because that's what my mother taught me, right? So
Right.
those were, and then I had a lot of aunts. I must have what's left. I think I started out with 4 aunts,
Okay.
and each one of them, they would come to me and say, "Don't be that kind of man.
Uh-huh.
Don't be that way." Okay, and she's just trying to tell me what women like what kind of men they like. Upright men,
Uh-huh.
men who you could trust the words that they
Right.
say what they do, they don't do a lot of talking. They'll do enough to get them to say what they're doing, and then it gets done.
Right.
And so those are the kind, and I was raised by those kinds of men. My grandfather was such a man.
Hmm.
His father murdered his mother at a very young age in Mississippi, way back in the early 1900s.
Wow. Hmm.
So in those days, there wasn't the social service network as we understand.
Right.
It was like family members came and
Hmm.
said, "I'll take that one." Another family member came, "I'll take the little one." Some more came, "I ain't taking that big one, but I'll take the little one." And the big one might have been 13 years old, mind you. So the
Okay.
big one had to get out there and find a way to feed themselves because it wasn't available. So this was the rural South. And so he learned, which was in turn taught to me, it was like, you just got to make it happen for yourself. If you want to eat and you want shelter, it doesn't matter how the world is constructed
Right.
and what's right and what's wrong. You
Hmm.
got to eat and you got to find a way because the world is the way that the world is, and you got to. And so that was a kind of a learning thing. I'm really illustrating how important family is for a young child.
Right.
So as growing up, I thought that that's what a man does. He doesn't cry. He just makes it happen.
Right.
There's food to eat all the time. There's shelter. There's warmth. There's all these things. And so that's what I learned from my grandmother. I'm sorry, my grandfather watching him. And
Uh-huh.
my uncle was another important. So watching these people, they gave me a template for life. And so when I stepped into life as a young person, you're on your own now, and those were the things that I had going forward. In addition to that, my mother she became blind later on in life. So
Uh-huh.
she had to really transition from a sighted life to a non-sighted life and how to live successfully in a non-sighted world.
Mm.
after having sight. And
Right.
those are lessons in that to learn from me. Those were lessons that I learned from her that I
Mhm.
was able to give to my kids, and like how to keep one foot in front of the other, keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing.
Mhm.
And which is unfortunately lost on a lot of young people today, but life is like that. Every day is an opportunity to get up and make your life new.
Right.
It's like it's possible. It really is. Like yesterday could have been worse.
Right.
You was 2 steps away from heaven. I'm sorry, hell. And then today, it could be a new. It could be a new world for you. So
Yeah. As
yeah,
long as you keep moving, right?
yeah. Oh my goodness, yes. So that. Uh, Christian faith is a very important um, tool to have in your life as a guide.
Mm-hmm.
So as a child, you're not really like aware of the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
As a child, you're just doing what you're told. But what happens is eventually it'll start making sense to you.
Right.
But as a child, you might get Christianity first by reading something like Proverbs.
Uh-huh.
Because that's like, even if it's in Old Testament or New Testament form, it's like, wow, that makes sense. Wow, okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a bad wife, you're gonna have a bad life. So
Mm-hmm.
there are things, or honor your parents, or listen to your parents. They're trying to help you. Those kinds of things. And so I think that would be, sometimes that's like the easiest way to, like, you know what, I got some good stuff for you. It's going to really help you out, especially if they're young people, because it's like sometimes when you explain the gospel to people, it's like, it's little foreign. It's not tangible. It's something I can't, but I can get you shaking your head. You can get any kid,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's a wayward kid, if he's reading Proverbs, it's like you'll get him shaking his head.
It's like,
Yeah,
oh, that makes sense, right?
that's right. Yeah, they told me that. And that's the way to get insight. And the same thing is, like, people will watch your life as opposed to what you say. I can do this about the gospel all day long, right? But
Mm-hmm.
if you see me living my white life trying to, like, this works. Like, oh, okay. I have more respect for that man because he's trying to incorporate something in his life. Because it's easy to do this. It is so easy to say what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. But so those are the things that really, really influenced my life. It's just basically the family that I was born and raised in, and watching the men in my life, watching the women in my life, and then those people that I met along the way, which would be my wife and my husband. I'm sorry, my wife and my children. Hey,
What happened to what happened to Doc?
I
I
don't.
hope she didn't have an emergency with her mom.
Oh, I
Doc.
hope not too.
Yeah.
Okay.
She just left us. Man, you got an interesting story. And I'm crazy about that wonderful, magnificent star wife of yours, man.
Oh wow.
You have a great story, man. I'm sitting here listening to it. And I mean, more young men need to hear that story, because
I think so. We used to go to read stories to children in
hmm
elementary school, me and my wife.
okay.
And I was amazed by the little kids who had never met a man
Mm.
who had a dress shirt and a jacket.
hmm
And he walked upright and his
hmm
pants weren't sagging.
Yeah.
And he walks with a kind of a comfort in his life, right?
Yeah.
Like, because some things have worked out for me. I
Yeah.
raised my kids successfully. But there are things that have worked. And so when I began to read these stories, and the kids who see me read with such comfort, they were like, "How is that possible?"
hmm
But it's because they hadn't been exposed to it.
Exactly.
Like, as a child, I watched my mother read all the time, And I said to myself, when I get big, I'm going to read books that don't have pictures.
That's right.
That was amazing to me that my mother could read books that didn't have pictures. And so as a child, that's what and that's why it's important that if your kids are around you, you have to be aware of like the things that you're doing. So if you're cussing around your kids if all they hear is you cussing, it's not gonna be good. And because that's what they know, they're watching you. So
Well, and the other thing is, this is like you said, if they, they're watching you when you don't think they're watching you. They're watching how you walk. They're watching how you comb your hair. They're watching what kind of clothes you wear, and if you think that they're not, then the results is what we got right now, of children doing things,
absolutely.
raising themselves.
My grandfather used to drink, but we didn't know he drank.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes he'd get a little happy and but we didn't know. Because but nowadays they drink in front. They sit on the porch,
Yeah,
drink in front of the kids. They
yeah.
talk about stuff in front of the kids that they shouldn't talk about, like what they gonna do, how they gonna do it, whatever. And this down your way. Oh, okay, we're just talking.
There she is.
Okay,
We had a
Everything
little
good?
bit of a problem,
it's
but I
okay.
think we're back on, and he'll be able to edit it, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. He'll be able to have it. I just I'll get out of the way now. But yeah, I told him I'm enjoying listening to the interview. And you guys are natural, so I'm gonna get out of the way and just continue to listen.
Cool.
And
Thank
and
you.
and thank you, Mr. Thomas. I've heard some great things about you, and so I just appreciate you and honor you as being a real black man and a real black father and a real black example of excellence. So thank you again.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Okay, so we were talking about how your family
Yes.
your in has influenced you and shaped how you've lived your life. One of the things you mentioned was that your wife was had a responsibility to go into the military. So
Yes.
tell a little bit about that, having grown up in Indianapolis, right,
Right.
in Indiana, and then that transition into military life for you.
Initially, um, well, when my wife and I were becoming serious, she told me she had an obligation to the Air Force because of the full ride scholarship she had as an undergraduate. I said,
Uh huh.
okay. So initially, we had no idea what we were getting. Pam had a little bit of an idea because she was ROTC,
Mm-hmm.
Reserve Officer Training Corps, as an undergraduate student at Indiana University. So she had some idea of what that world was like. And usually for black people, we're aware of the military because black people go into the military. But there are fewer black people who are in the officer corps,
Uh huh.
which is a little bit different. And so there's a culture that we had to learn as we went along. We
Okay.
had to keenly observe this institution before us because there was nobody to help us with this different kind of world that we lived in.
Okay.
And so what we came up with was we're going to just really critically observe how this institution works, institutionally.
Mm-hmm.
And so much so that we will even look at the jobs that some people get as a lawyer. She was a lawyer in the military.
Uh huh.
And the people that got these jobs did well.
Okay.
And so that's how we probably did well. And then we talked a lot about the importance of character, the importance of integrity, the importance of honesty, the importance of hard work
Uh huh.
at your job place, whatever that might be.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so people begin to respect that in a person.
Sure.
And most of her bosses were fair
Mm-hmm.
because they realized how important she was to the mission that was at hand, that particular mission that was at hand. So getting into it, it wasn't that difficult because we were committed, because we thought that we would do the 4 years that Pam was obligated to fulfill,
Uh-huh.
and we would go off to something else. But it just turned into 28 years.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And stuff started working for us.
Mm-hmm.
And our kids started to see places that we as children only dreamed of. I mean, dreamed of.
Wow.
And so my kids started to see places and like take for granted places like, I remember we were first assigned to Germany. Went to Germany,
Uh-huh.
and ironically, as an undergraduate, I had the major that I had required me to have 10 hours of foreign language.
Okay.
For whatever reason, I picked German. Don't know
Wow.
why, but I did. So when we get to Germany, I had an ability to have, at least on a conversational level, some basic things. So
Wow.
I could be at a outdoor cafe with my kids, and I could order coffee, some kind of beverage. I can
Uh-huh.
count money. I can say if it was $13.98 in German, I could say that what that change was, or if the total was $13.98, I could say that.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So my kids were there observing that, so I could go. One thing I do is I refinish furniture. So I would go to hardware stores in Germany and say, "Yo, I need some red stain or piece of wood that I'm working with." So man, my kids would be there, and they would there to observe how their father interacted with the world, which is critically important.
Mm.
And even now, even when I was back in this country, and I would have an issue with a customer service person, instead of saying, "You gonna give me my money, I'm gonna tear this place up," right?
Right.
That's the child witnessing adult how to resolve an issue. So
Sure.
a child might say, "Well, if I have a customer service issue, this is how you solve it."
Right.
You
Right.
But if you had a parent that says, "Well, I have a lot more tools in my toolbox to deal with issues," be nicer. I can say, "Can I please speak with your supervisor?" Any number of things I can do.
Right.
But your kids are with you, learning from you how to deal with the world.
True.
You are their primary tool to like how. So that was an important thing. And I knew how the adults were in my life and how they helped my life, and I knew that I can in turn do the same for my children.
Sure.
So that was the kind of the early going ons in my wife's military career. We were so busy raising children. We were dealing with we were in California, we were in Germany, we were in England for a bit, we were in Washington D.C., Alabama, Illinois, and probably a few other places. But like in between those spaces, there's a big space in between those different locations, and so we were busy like living life because you're always raising your kids. You're raising your child to the next level. So if they're 6 months old, what are 8-month-old children to do? So you're like right there. And sometimes it's just like staying with it. Like you have 2 children, your wife's going to work every day. You're trying to teach values. You're growing yourself. So you're living life anyway. And the challenge, one of the challenges for us as a family raising our children we were never around family. It was just Pam and I. We were never closer than, I think the closest we were was 7 hours to where we were born and raised. And we were as far away as across the ocean.
Right.
So it meant that it was Pam and I. That's it. There was no grandmother that we can rely upon. There's no aunt to come and babysit every once in a while. Uncle take you to the baseball game. There was none of that. No cousins to play with. It was just me and Pam and our children because we never lived anywhere close to our family. And so
Yeah.
it had to be us. We had to be on the same page in terms of what values that we were going to teach our children. Like, because I was born and raised in Indianapolis, and I have fond memories. So my kids have been in so many different places. We had to establish a house or home wherever we went. So our kids would have memories. When I was a child, that was a home for us. That was just not a place we were at for 2 or 3 years. That was home. Then the next place, that's home. The next place. So that was the challenge of being a parent in a military family. And you're still going to, how would you say, nurture, you still have the responsibility of nurturing relationships with extended family, even though you're not around them. So you still have to nurture the relationship with, okay, that's your grandmother, that's your grandfather, that's your mother's father, that's your mother's mother, that's your mother's aunt, da 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 da. All the things you do to like nurture those bonds that you have with family. So that would be the difference in like the military career that we had, and we were older. We weren't 18 doing this stuff. We were 22 and older, doing this stuff. So we're a little bit older. We had a little. I think that we had a more of a solid foundation than say if we were younger.
One of the things that I'm hearing throughout is the intentionality of your family and your parents in pouring into your life so that you would be able to navigate the world. And then as you mentioned in your transition from college, marrying Pam, and you and her then became intentional even about the military and what jobs to request and those sorts of things, and the intentionality of building a family in ways that would make a difference in your children's lives. And when you think about that process of pouring in and that intentionality, I think that's the underlying current that I continue to hear as you tell us about your story. Regardless of the circumstances that are put in front of you, the intentionality of this is what I want my life to be, right? Yeah, yeah, that's awesome.
When you're a young child, you actually say stuff like, when I get big, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to have that. And so as life happens to you as a child, so for example, my father wasn't in my life very much. And I really, as a child, wanted a man in my life. I just wanted it. It was missing for me. And and I realized when I got older that my father just wasn't capable. He just wasn't. And I was as a young child, I was mad at him. And as I got older and I became more wise, it was just my father wasn't capable. It just wasn't in him. And I forgave him. But at the same time, it taught me like, I want to be this kind of daddy.
Right.
Not that kind of daddy. But not in a bad way, not mad and anger. I gotten over that. But it was like I desired a relationship with my children. Right. There was a desire at a very young age because it was a missing for me. And so now I have the blessing of like having a relationship with my children. It's just, and I talk to other men my age about the blessing, and I talk to young men too. It's like, you cannot believe the blessing of having the love of an adult child after you've been there every day. I was an in the house daddy. There's a difference between in the house daddy and not out, and he ain't in the house. So because you're like there every day, and if you make like all of us have shortcomings. So as a parent, you assess your children. You'll say, well, my son is not so good at this. I need to really give him this tool because I know later on he'll need this tool. He's not too good. I'm going to make him more comfortable about people he's never met before, and I'm going to really work on that. So those are the things that, like as a parent, that you're constantly. When you're in the house, you're constantly looking at your child and making it just like they're looking at us for guidance and this is the way to go. you're looking at your child to see where you need to fill in the gaps. Like, this one's a missing. And so that thing that I talk about when they're 32 and whatever, they have their own house.
Right. I love that.
They're making their own story.
Yeah, I love that, and it goes beyond. And I love that you added because being in the house is so important. It's so important for the man to be in the house. But you didn't leave it at that. It was again that undercurrent of intentionality, not just being there, but physically, but being present intentionally and pouring into their lives. Yeah.
There's something when you see your child. I've heard some men say this, and I've heard women say this a lot. There is something when you see your child for the first time. There's something that just takes over you.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, I said, there's nothing that will ever happen to this child. Not while I'm breathing there. Then the second one, the same thing. There's nothing, because my job is to get you into this world as a fully functioning human being. That's it.
That's your job.
And
right?
Somebody's going to have a bad day if they get in the way of that. So that was just, and that was, I don't know, it was just in me. God put that in me. Like I've heard mothers say, I don't know what to tell you. The car was on top of my child, and I lifted the car up and had to get him out. It was just that simple.
Right.
There's nothing, yeah, that's how I would say that as a parent. It was like that was really, really in me. Because I knew, like, the people that poured into me.
Right.
I wasn't in and out of jail. I wasn't in and out of trouble. There were people that either said, if you go to jail, you're going to stay there. Right. Or, as a child, it was, that doesn't make sense going to jail. I don't get the logic of it. I don't want to do that. That don't look like a good place to go. For me, it was just a simple thing, right? If you steal that boy's bike, they're going to send you to juvenile hall. I'm like, I don't want to go to juvenile hall.
that doesn't seem appealing, right?
I was really, didn't have to be a complicated social issue for me. It's like, that don't look like fun. You mean they put you in a jail and you can't get out? Now, some people might need a little bit more, but I was pretty good. You tell me something one time and I'm pretty good. That was one of the things. And even when I was older, because dope was a big thing in the 60s. And people were doing all sorts of things to get high.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, people would buy gasoline and somehow get the vapors in the paper bag. I don't know how they do that. And then
gas vapors?
Yeah. And so when they described it to me, I was like, it don't look like fun. It was like I was seeing elephants and that. I'm like, that don't look like fun to me, right? So I'm like, I'm good on gasoline, man.
You're not gonna try it, right?
but that was just how that my nature is like. That's not good. That's not bad. Because even biblically, some of the principles are just straight up pragmatic. It makes sense. It's like that's why it stood the test of time, because it's true. It's tested. Like you read it once, if you follow that, you'll be good. If you don't, you're gonna have problems. It tells you that this is.
Yeah.
But that's mainly the thing. Is that we had something. We had a template. The Bible is a template for life, and I had people in my life that provided a template for me, and how to, like, as opposed to saying they did. They went to church every Sunday. Yeah. There's a way of speaking in this environment. There's a way of speaking in this environment. Right. We're not loud over here. We're a little quiet. And also, when we go to church, we cleanse ourselves. We prepare ourselves. We try to be before we enter into the temple. So there's lots of stuff that we teach children. Like, this is to prepare you for. This stuff has been figured out. Right. 2,000 years ago it was figured out. Really. Come on, man. And so you don't have to bump your head. And that's the respect that I have for those who came before me, because they were essentially saying, you don't have to bump your head. I'm going to show you It took me 7 times to bump my head for me to get it right. Maybe it'll take you 5 times or 4 times. Because I love you so much that that's what I want for you. I want ease for your life. I don't want hardship for your life. So
Yeah, yeah, that's wonderful. So you were traveling around. You saw some amazing places with your family, and you were a military spouse. Once military, always military. So
yeah,
you're still a military spouse.
yeah.
But as you traveled around, one of the things that you did was photography. Tell me about how you even started in photography.
I'm not so sure. I was given cameras when I was a kid, and I photographed stuff,
Okay.
things that were in front of the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I guess it was started in high school. I was on the yearbook staff,
Okay.
and I eventually became the photo editor of the yearbook. So I was tasked with photographing different school events, and so that's where it started. And then when I attended university, I did a little work on the university uh, newspaper, and I pursued that. I pursued it for a little while, and then I somehow ended up doing portraits after university,
Okay.
and that's where it really started my journey as a photographer.
Okay.
That was yeah. So that was my work life. That was the thing that I did outside of the house, or I did separate from. That was like an individual thing that I wanted to do. I was really intrigued by the idea of making portraits, and also too, being raised as I was, it was all it was pounded into me that you had to have a skill,
Okay.
and photography is certainly one of those things where you'll always be able to eat off of.
Mm-hmm.
It will feed you. So whatever you do, whether you're a wedding photographer or it could be a school photographer, any kind, but the world has changed. The technology in photography has changed in such a way that
Mm-hmm.
it has been a paradigm shift in photography.
Okay.
So the photographer now who can create images
Mm-hmm.
for the marketplace is going to have more value than a person who simply records what's in front of his camera.
Okay. Okay.
Because the technology is such that anybody can point the camera at any subject and get a reasonably good, in focus, good color photograph of what's in front of the camera.
Yeah, people take pictures with their phone.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you can't take pictures better than people can with their phone, you're not going to eat very well.
Right.
So what happens is you begin, and I did studio work.
Mm-hmm.
So studio work is where you have the greatest degree of control over the environment. So you take a dark room, it's totally black, and you start adding stuff.
Okay.
Subject, the lights, the position of the lights, the intensity of your lights, the angle of the camera to the subject, any number of things that you have to do to make that image come to life. So you're creating something that's in your brain, and you make it real for a viewer. So the final result, we don't know how long it took. Sometimes you get lucky, it's quick, but if you're making an image from the mind's eye,
Mm-hmm.
you put all these elements together, boom, you're done, and you present it to the public, and they like it or don't like it. Then, so photography is different because now in the digital age, because you cannot navigate the internet or social media without an image. So somehow or another, that image, whether it was commercially produced or
Mm-hmm.
amateur reduced,
Mm-hmm.
it had to be created for the media, the internet, to even survive, or any other social media platforms. They're
Got
image driven.
it. Okay.
So since they're image driven, it lends itself to like good photographers. Like
Okay.
I can give you content if you're creating content for your space. Yeah, if you're a retailer or manufacturer or whoever you might be, you need image content for your space. Nobody's gonna go to your space and just read text.
Right.
They might read a sentence or two, then
Mm-hmm.
they're out of there.
And go to the next thing.
Right, right. So for a photographer, the world is changing that way. That because the world is driven, no matter where you put your feet on the planet. Because I've seen people in these remote villages
Mm-hmm.
with their cell phones, and they're
Yep.
accessing the internet and getting pictures and whatever. They're even communicating with people in other parts of the world. So photography is in a new realm of like discovery. So that person who is creative,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be good for them.
Right.
And but you have to be in the world that, because everybody has a camera, but not everybody has the ability to deliver images. So that look, if you pull up your TV, if you pull up your internet connection, you look at the monitor, you're going on the internet. What makes you click on is usually an image.
Right.
That looks interesting. Click.
Mm-hmm.
So now, what makes you stay on it? Dynamic images.
Right.
So in that way, so that's the world that I occupied for a little while. I don't do it as much, but I was, I mean, as deep as you can go. Just like really making the money, really putting the time in, having if you're an artist of any kind, you got to have a studio. You just got to be able to go to your workspace and work. There's always, when you're in the zone of whatever you do, you're in that zone. You're always thinking that stuff, and you have that creative thing that's going on where you're always thinking about images. You might see something, it might inspire an image. It might inspire you to go to the studio. So,
right. Yeah. So you shared with me, and we're going to share with our audience some of the things that you've created. And so tell us about this African piece.
The images that I primarily do now are created images.
Okay.
So I take something, I go to the studio and photograph it in such a way that it would make the viewer like, oh, it stops them to make them look a little bit longer and ponder the image. So my wife picked that up when she was in Africa.
Okay.
And that particular image is probably, it might be 10 inches tall.
Huh. Okay.
So my idea was to photograph that image as if it were a portrait, because I did a lot of portraits when I was coming up, thousands of portraits. So I lit it like it was a human portrait subject.
Huh. Okay.
And photographed it, and the rest is history. And I show it a lot. I mean, it's part of the portfolio. When people say, "Well, let me see your work," that's usually one of it. It's just a simple, we called them Afro pics when we were kids. And the comb that we had when we were teenagers, it was thick in your afro, and
okay.
it would be a fist at the top of the comb, and that's what that was. It's like a comb.
Wow.
So I photographed it. So that's the and I try to take something that people would normally see, and then when they saw it, it was like, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And that's the only job that you have as a photographer, is to make the viewer stop and say, wow, that's interesting. And if you can do it in the world that we live in the internet, where people are looking at images all the time, and your image stops them, you've done your job. Because there are literally millions of images out there in the world, but I got you to stop on the image that I made. That made it interesting for you. So
wow. This next image that you're sharing, it's Bart Simpson. I'm not exactly sure how to describe it. It's a what does it say here? It's a image of a five across with a comic type piece. The blue shirt, blue shorts. This image of individuals in a line, identical. Does that
Oh, okay.
okay?
As a photographer, thank you. That's Bart.
Okay.
That's Bart Simpson.
Okay.
As a photographer, you're always looking for stuff to photograph because
Mhm.
I'm trying to distinguish myself from the rest of the photographers out there. Not only that, but I'm competing with photographers globally, right?
Okay. Mhm.
So when I started to do the studio kinds of work, I would always go to thrift stores, flea markets, um, estate sales, because I'm always looking for material to photograph.
Okay.
I'm trying to photograph. I'm always looking for stuff. So I was in a thrift store, and there was a box full of Barts.
Ah.
So I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but I think I'm going to do. And so in my studio, I have just boxes of stuff. It could be all kinds of stuff that I picked up and said, "Well, that looks interesting. Maybe I'll photograph it one day." And then it came to me one day. I said, "Oh, clone Barts."
Ah, I get it. Mhm.
And so, because I had to convince you to hire me to do a job for your company, that whatever widget thing that you do or you make, anything that you make, that I can make your widget look good. I can make people stop on the page and click on your website because of my photography.
Got it. Okay.
So that's the goal. And
Mhm.
that came from that. And I'm always looking around. I'll look at a stick that's bit in a funny way.
Mhm.
And I'll think maybe if I put an egg between the branches or something, anything that, because that's what a photographer does. As soon as they see stuff, there is clicking.
Right.
What
So
can
you're
I do?
creative. You
Yeah,
create
you're like,
naturally.
where would I put the light? What kind of, now would it be intense light or would I subdue it a little bit? Okay, where would the camera angle be? Those are the things you start doing. So that's where that came from. Was some years ago. It's like, wow, that would be a great idea. But I'm searching. I'm always searching for stuff out there in the world to
Uh-huh.
photograph.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
cloning of Bart Simpson.
yeah.
There's this next one which is it's so cool to me. I'd love for you to talk through the idea behind it. But there's a chicken here with a broken egg, and right beside a
Oh,
broken egg.
that's just similar to Bart.
Okay.
I was in a dollar store, and they got these dollar store toys.
Uh-huh.
And I saw the expression on the chicken's face, and I said, "Well, that's interesting. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but one day it's going to come to me." So I took it. Then it came to, why don't I? Because the expression what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Uh-huh.
So I'm playing with it because as a photographer, I want to take a concept.
Mm-hmm.
So I could take a concept, say chicken and the egg.
Okay.
So those are words, but visually, what can I do to make that come to life?
Uh-huh.
And so I found the chicken. It's like, oh, naked chicken, no feathers. That's interesting. He has this expression. And I had to do a little painting on a little bit. And then I'll just simply just crack an egg open. And that was the one that was chosen. Some of them had the egg. It's there. It's a real egg cracked open.
Okay.
So the chicken has this exasperated look on his face, like
Right.
terror. And so that's the thing. And you stopped, and that was my goal because I'm competing with other photographers, right?
Right.
So like I want you to like, oh, his stuff made me stop and look at it. Whereas and so that's what it's all about because it's a very competitive world that we live in. It's far more visual. When the internet started, it had no pictures on it, and we
Mm.
live in a very just a very visual world, and a lot of highly skilled people out there.
Yeah.
But you got to put the time in. And from my days as a portrait photographer, doing I've probably done 10,000 portraits in my lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
and that gets you somewhere. It gets you. There's a mastery that comes from doing something with that much repetition.
Right.
There's a mastery. So if Michael Jordan want to expand his jump shot from 15 feet to 25 feet, he might shoot that 15,000 times. to say that I have increased and I know that I have a 25-foot jump shot now because I put the time in. I got the mastery. And I swear to God, things will come to you. Something will come to you at 100 times that didn't come to you at 10 times. Something will come to, so that's the mastery of doing something. The young people make the mistake of thinking, that's boring because I'm doing it over and over again. But it's an artistic effect. An artist has to do that many times to have a mastery of it. Like when people are like, well, how did you do that? And it's so hard. And it's like, but I've done that 10,000 times. So how do I explain to you how I did that without you doing it 10,000 times? So, but the images kind of explain that. It was just a wonderful, I guess, work for me to do. It fit my personality, the whole idea of being creative, and then having these. And then some of those images that you looked at, some are over 10 to 15 years old. So what that means is, if it's a visually dynamic image, 15 years ago, it will still, 15 years from now, it will still excite you.
Yeah. Yeah. This last image, I love it. The dandelion, I think you call it the dandelion blow. And as I looked at it, it immediately brought back to mind an image of childhood when we would go and we would pick up those flowers and blow them. And it was it was so much fun. So talk about that one a little bit.
It's sometimes the strongest images are the simplest images. And that connected you. Here I am. I was able to connect with you with such a personal experience that happened like however many years ago, multiple decades ago, right?
Yes.
And so, and that is the profound like aspect of photography, is that I can relate to you with this image that I made. And we've all blown that. We've all blown those. All of us. But none of us have seen how those seeds detach from the flower. We don't get to see that up close. So I was saying they peel off one at a time, just pull it off. Yeah. You can actually see one that's pulled away, one is getting ready to pull away, and another one's like kind of sort of. So and that's one of the wonders of photography, is that I can actually let you see the world that you see all the time but you don't see. Right. It was like letting you. It's like seeing something for the first time in life. Something as simple as that. Like all the time, I'm driving down the car and I can see them blowing off in the field. I can see them, but how can, like, I'm going to show you something like for the first time. Someday you take for granted for the first time. That's one of the wonders of photography, is that like you could do that with a person, and I can go anywhere on the planet, yeah, and show that image, especially where those flowers grow, and people will connect to it. Right. And that's one of the joys that I get out of that. Like there's like 100 years from now, people will get that picture. If it's done right, people will get it. And it's the whole thing of like, and like I said, we live in such a visual world that picture just draws people to it because of its simplicity. And there's a lot of design that went into that. And also too, if you get about, I don't know, say if you go in the field, you pick those things, you try to maintain it so that they don't lose the seedlings. Then you get it to your studio. Then you set up some apparatus to blow the thing. You blow it in a certain direction. The lighting's already figured out. So there's a whole lot going on that I find intriguing as a photographer, like recreating that for the viewer. It's just really, man, it just does something for your head to do that. Like somebody else saw it and like, wow, it triggered some memory in their consciousness and their memory. So yeah, and I think that's so amazing that you can communicate
with the world through photography, through those images.
Right.
Um, and it's just amazing. Just as I said, it just touches your heart and it brings back memories. And it's a way of communicating without words, right?
Yes. Yes. And as I get older, scripture reminds me like, shut your mouth. Listen. Don't talk so much.
Hmm.
You learn a lot more. But
Yeah.
it's and I'm happy to hear that, because that's what it's all about, is to kind of, because we all live in the body, and what's your job in the body?
Hmm.
And that, while I was working, that was one of the jobs that I did,
Yeah.
and that was to enlighten people to see the world in a way that they didn't before. That's a really big thing, to
Yeah.
show somebody in the world something different.
Yeah, yeah, that's wonderful. And so you had photography and you were able to travel around while you all saw the world. And
Yeah,
yeah.
actually, um, we're talking a 28-year period.
Uh-huh.
So at some at different times in that 28 years, I was doing different things. So sometimes it was like, um, my wife would be gone for 6 months. So it
Sure.
was like, so I just had my kids.
So like for deployment or something?
Yes, it was a deployment.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the world, for me at that time, was my kids. And
Sure.
so I remember a deployment my wife had, was 6 months, and we were in England.
Uh-huh.
So life is so, okay. We're circle the wagons, and I'm just going to focus on the kids,
Sure.
and so that they can deal with the transition of their mother not being here.
Mm-hmm.
It's just me, and grandmama's 3,000 miles away,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was my focus at the time. So it just depends on what period of life we were in. So at the end of my life, my wife's um, career, military career, the kids were out of the house.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And so I was able to devote more time to my work. And also in my career, I transitioned from film to the digital workspace, which is
Mm-hmm.
two totally different spaces in terms of recording the image.
Uh-huh.
Making of the image didn't change, but the recording of the image did. So all the tools that I learned um, uh, in film uh, benefited me in digital. Digital is just how the image is recorded, as opposed to anything else. Nothing changes except for the recording of the image.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
But the thing about that is, again, with how you interacted with the world, it was one way that you did photography, and you saw that the world was changing, and so you adapted, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
that's life anyway.
right, right. But how
Yeah,
many people do you know that don't want to adapt? They want to hold on to the way it has been, and so therefore, sometimes people would describe it as they get left behind because they're still trying to hold on to what was and not
right.
to what is.
For 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 Pam and I, what it was easier for us because we were always adapting.
Hmm.
So we were in the DC area for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that, we were in Northern California and Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
And both of those are adapting to, like, this is a different space.
Right.
And now, or the cost of living out here is like, wow, didn't expect that. Or now my kids are teenagers. They're not, they're older teenagers, not younger teenagers. So you're always adapting anyway.
Mm-hmm.
For us, we were always adapting to the physical space, because every 2 or 3 years, sometimes longer, we're adapting to a totally different physical space.
Sure.
So sometimes it was like, um, Washington, D.C. in no way resembles California.
Mm-hmm.
Germany in no way resembles England. There's just different places that and so you have to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
And then having kids, you learn how to adapt.
Sure.
It's just the nature of like the world. You can, but we were always moving, and the kids were growing, and it was always something new bosses.
Yeah.
Sometimes new countries, new states. So we had to learn how to adapt. Now, if we had one 9 to 5 job and one zip code, then you can fashion your life in such a way that you
Mhm.
don't have to adapt. You can fashion your life to like I only these things are going to happen in a 12-hour period of time,
Sure.
literally.
Mhm.
But for us, we were always something new, something different. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And I think that's amazing. The adaptability that military families have,
yeah,
because
yeah,
you understand that you have to be flexible, get to know this new environment, and be who you are in whatever space you're in.
right. That's challenging. That is wow. Yeah, I love how you said that. Yeah, because you still have to be who you are.
Right.
You still have to develop as a parent. You have to become a better parent, a better husband, a better wife. All these things you're you still send your kids to Bible study. You still like teaching what that passage was and why it's important to acknowledge people doing stuff for you. You're still in that no matter where you're at, you're still like teaching those things. Life still goes on, and
Right.
you still have relationships that you're nurturing. When we were active duty in the military, I still nurtured my mother. I still took care of her from afar. We made sure that she had money. Or you need this and that, whatever. You're still doing those things as a
Mhm.
human being. You're still trying to find. You're always looking for a church to attend. Like if you move every 2 or 3 years, it's like let me find another church.
Right.
And you might be in a church 2 months now. "Hey, this ain't working.
Right.
Find another church." It didn't always work out the first one. It's like I don't know. So you're always transitioning, I think, in that
Mhm.
it's a different space.
Yeah.
You're not prepared to like be adaptable. It's
Mhm.
not going to be a space for you.
Right.
If you stay single, you might have a shot. But you got a family, and that is critical. How well your family adapts because it could affect the active duty member.
Sure.
Because a family can ruin your career too.
Yeah.
I've, I've seen them where they sent families home from overseas because the kid and the wife wouldn't act married or something. Y'all got to go.
Right. Right. The whole family is
Yeah.
a part of that, a part of that intentionality and adapting. So
Well,
you,
you gotta know that too. You
yeah,
know, you become very aware that that the military member, you can embarrass the military member. You become really aware of that as a spouse, and you become aware of that as children. That the military member, you can bring shame on that, or you can jeopardize their career. So that's
sure.
an awareness that you have, particularly overseas, because that's the other thing in the military. You become aware that you become a de facto ambassador because a lot of times when you're overseas, people are meeting they're meeting Americans for the first time.
Right. Right.
So for them, it's like, wow, you're a Black American. What is it like? Da, 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 da. And they're curious as to this information of what it's like to like. And sometimes I've been to places, particularly as you get closer to the third world, they
Mhm.
don't even make a distinction between you're a Black American, you're an American.
You're
That
just
comes
right.
up first.
Right.
Like they can't even get to the concept. You could say, well, um, some of the Black people in my community don't do as well as me in America.
Mhm.
And they'll scratch their head because they're like, but he's an American.
Yeah. Right.
There's running water every day,
Yeah.
and the lights will come on, and the phones work, and there's no blackouts.
Mhm.
And so for them, it's a different, like, I can't feel your pain
Right. What pain?
because your level of comfort, like, I urinate in a hole that was dug in the ground. So that kind of, when you're coming from that kind of world, it's like there's difficult to relate to, like your difficulties.
Right.
Like
Right.
I might eat every other day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, I'm looking, yeah. So that's that would be the. I was aware of that. One is the you become an ambassador for
Mm-hmm.
Americans when you live overseas, and the
Mm-hmm.
responsibility of the family not to bring shame on the active duty military member. Those are really big in the military, and you wouldn't experience that unless you were there. It was kind of
Right.
that thing, that kind of light that goes on.
Yeah. Yeah. So you all did 28 years, and then you once again you decided to transition. Pamela was retiring. Um, you decided to move back to a familiar place, to Kentucky. Tell us about that transition back.
It was interesting because Pam came home one day. Our kids were long gone out of the house.
Hmm.
So it was basically me, Pam, and the dog. So, and Pam would, and this was the end of her career. Like, everything has been done. It's
Hmm.
like, this truly is the end. If we were, I mean, Pam would come home for lunch. It was a relax. But one day she came home and said, I'm done.
Hmm.
I'm just done. So, okay, cool. What you want to do? Well, hand in my papers and retire. Fine. And we weren't planning it per se as such, not quite. But our parents were getting older. My parents were gone; they had died, and so that was a concern of us for us.
Hmm.
And once Pam said that I'm retiring, we did that dance, retired, and we came back to her girlhood neighborhood.
Wow.
Her parents bought a house in this neighborhood, and they were the first black family on the block.
Okay.
This is about 1962. My
Hmm.
wife is 1 year younger than I am. I'm 65. She's 64. Um, so in her elementary school, there were as many black kids in the elementary school photos as there were white kids. It was mixed before the whole neighborhood changed. So in her lifetime, her parents still had the house that they bought when she was a young child. And Pam wanted to come back to her girlhood neighborhood. She wanted to do something.
Wow.
So me, I can live anywhere.
Hmm.
I can live in the deepest ghetto, but I'll make my house the best house in the ghetto.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter because I'll make it better. Wherever
Right.
we're at, I'll make it better. So we came back to her girlhood neighborhood, and we found a house in her girlhood neighborhood. And it took 3 years
Hmm.
because it's a little bit more challenging to buy a house in an urban area. It can
Hmm.
happen,
Hmm.
but it's a little. You have to look a little bit harder,
Hmm.
and you can make a difference on the block once you're on the block.
Hmm.
And so that's what we done. My wife was interested in politics, and so she became a legislator in the Kentucky uh, legislature.
Hmm.
This is the district. We live in the district where she's a representative
Hmm.
of in Kentucky,
Yeah.
and it worked out. It's just interesting that to be back. Like, this is the place my wife grew up in. She went to school over there, and her family's in the neighborhood. They're everywhere. There are a lot of which is really a good thing. There's lots of family in the neighborhood. Her parents are down the street. She can go see her parents often, often every day. Um, Brothers and sisters are in the neighborhood. Aunts, uncles are in the neighborhood. She has a
Yeah.
very big family, so
Yeah.
that's where we ended up at, and it's really been a good experience.
I think that's amazing, given all of the amazing places, right? That you were able to travel to. You guys have been to Egypt. You guys have been to England, Germany, so many different places around the world. Yet, and you could have gone. just about wherever you wanted to go. But you all decided to go back to make a difference in Kentucky, in a place where she grew up. Right.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
you know what? What you said is absolutely true. Because there are things that when you live in an urban neighborhood, you have to have a certain outlook that you don't have to have in the suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
So as a homeowner in an urban area, um, like how I picked the block, the house that we live in. So I looked at, say, for example, on this. Well, where is it at in that area of the city? So that's the first thing. The
Mm-hmm.
second thing is how many homeowners are on the block.
Mm-hmm.
So on my block, there are 7 houses. Across the street from my house is a park, so there are no houses across the street. But on the block, there are 7 houses.
Mm-hmm.
And of those 7 houses, there are 6 owners. There's one renter.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole block is influenced by self-interest. Like, if the value of the houses go down on this block, it's going to affect the value of my house. So I have self-interest to make sure that block is pretty together. So I might make calls to the police that a normal person might not. It looks like somebody's abandoning that car across the street in the park.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'll pick up the trash more often than, say, maybe I wouldn't have to do in the suburbs. But it makes a difference on the block.
Right.
And the other homeowners tell me that it makes a difference in it, right, that I'm doing. Wow, it makes so you can really make a really big difference on your block. You can. You can make a huge difference on your block.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you do when you're a homeowner, when you buy a home in an urban area. And I know it's challenging, but we didn't have kids, so that wasn't a concern about the schools they went to. That would be a concern, and I can understand that. So because the kids were out of the house, then we can use other measures to determine how suitable that block is for us.
Mm-hmm. Good.
And there are things you can look at, crime reports. You can go over to that block at 10 o'clock at night and see what's going on over in that block. People drinking beer in front of their house on the porch, all sorts of things that you would use to, kind of utilize as a way of selecting a block. But it's been very, how would you say, it's such a blessing because so many people have come, like my neighbors is like, wow, you really made a difference, like that. It's like you pick up the trash and it encourages other neighbors to pick up the trash.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that we didn't know what kind of neighbors you were going to be. You're like, wow, you really made a difference on the block. And also the responsibility that you have to younger people. So my wife's involved in politics, so she's always going to the local neighborhood schools and neighborhood. She talks to the managers at the local grocery store. So there's a number of things, and she talks to all the ministers that are in her district. So there are a number of things that you can do and that are really quite rewarding. And then people come to, like I see them all the time. They'll say, wow, what you do is really makes a difference, or what your wife does really makes a difference. So it's a rewarding place to be.
Mm-hmm.
If you're I'm really into transforming someone's life for the better.
Mm-hmm.
Started out with my kids.
Right.
My job is to make my wife great. So as I encounter people in my journey in life, it's like, what have I done to make that a little bit better for that person?
Right.
In my journey, as I go through my journey, my job is to make it a little bit better for each person that I encounter in my journey.
Right.
And so, so where we're at now is, of course, I support Pam, but now that I'm around the house all the time and I have conversations with my neighbors, that sort of thing. And as I encounter kids and young people, I know what my task, my divine task at this stage in my life, I know what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm clear on that. Right.
Can you state it again for us, please? What is that task? You just turned 65. What is that task?
It's really, really simple because I believe that God puts uh, puts me in the path of others. I don't determine who I meet along the journey,
Okay.
but I can determine how I interact with that person when I encounter them on my journey, and what kind of tools that if it's necessary, because I'm usually older than most people I meet, like what tools that are necessary for you to, because we'll have a conversation, we'll talk, like what can I give this person? What can I do? Or my son will call me up. It's like, yo, Dad, I have a question about something. My daughter, same thing. So I think it's that way, and I've been blessed to be in a space in life where I'm in like a comfortable zone. Like I don't have to slay any more dragons.
Okay.
I don't have to prove anymore that I wanted to do this, I wanted to do that. But I'm at a comfort a place in my life. And it's like, enjoy it.
Yeah.
This, you kind of earned it. Like y'all were doing things all along the way, and now like just enjoy it.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of kind of in that space. I'm trying to let myself be in that space. And then it's like, oh, you should be doing stuff. You should be working harder. But I did all of that.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. Yeah, it's just enjoying the journey, enjoying my children, enjoying the people I meet, being thankful to God for the places I've seen, the people I've met, the things I were able to do, the just the wonder and beauty of life, the wonder and beauty of relationships.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, so those sort of things is like sometimes as Americans, I think that we take for granted, like some of those simple things in life.
Yeah.
That God gives us. Like Americans, we can be really want things to happen right now, yesterday. I want more of it, and yeah.
And not enjoying what we have, right? We want more and not enjoying what we already have.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah.
Just and we get examples all the time in our lives. Like my grandmother laid in the bed for 3 years after a stroke, literally looking at a ceiling for 3 years. And so, and when you go through something like that, you begin to treasure your good health.
Sure.
And so, like, if you have a little pain, you're like, oh, that's nothing, because I ain't laying in the bed 3 years looking at the ceiling. So there are things that, like God, like we're dealing with a lot of the older generation in our family. So I'm seeing, like, from them, like they might not have the energy to put their house in order like I have now. So I got energy to get my house in order.
Right.
But I'm 82 and it's like I just let some stuff go. But it's teaching me that I need to have my house in order before I get to that age, so I can because it's gonna be more difficult.
Sure.
The physical challenges of doing stuff are going to be more difficult. So there are things that you learn now for the future.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Thomas, for sharing a bit of your life with us. It has been truly educational, touching, inspiring. Thank you. Everyone, join us next week as we continue to talk to Thomas about his life and what he shares. See you next week.
Great show. Great show. I'm gonna
Seems like 3 shows.
It's uploading right now.
Yeah.
So once it gets uploaded, it's gonna send Thomas a copy and it's gonna send you a copy of Michelle. And it's gonna send a copy to the producer. So you guys had a good show, man. I enjoyed listening to the stories, man, and I don't have a creative bone in my body, Thomas, but boy, just understanding the creative mind in terms of seeing an egg and then seeing a pick, and all I would see is a pick. I would see nothing else.
Mhm.
Just
I need to send those pictures that actually.
Yeah. So he can put them in the editing
Hmm.
as you're talking about it.
Yeah, yeah. That it was awesome. Hmm.
And anything else you got in terms of anything else you know what to do. Anything else, Michelle, that you talked about that you got some actual pictures or something?
Hmm.
It'd be good because he could put that in editing. He could while y'all talking about it,
yeah, yeah,
he can shoot to that.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Great job, Thomas.
This
Hmm.
should be enough. I think you have 7. If you want more, I can send more, but I think 7 would probably.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm gonna forward those that you sent. It's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. Well. Thank you again for being on. We will get you that recording so you can take a look at it. We already have your headshot, and we will go from there. It's truly been a blessing. I enjoyed this so much.
Thank you, Michelle, and I enjoyed it too. And I always enjoy trying to make it a little bit easy for the next person.
Yeah,
Really.
yeah. I love it. All
All right.
right. Well, have a good Friday afternoon. It's the
All
week is
right then.
almost over. All right.
All
Take
right.
care.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for stepping on. I appreciate it. I just could not get that thing to start.
You gonna get what the just the way I see that is, you'll do it a couple of times, you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So I'll help you until you figure it out. But it's pretty easy.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I